just fine isn't enough. I don't think for any of us. We don't want to be just fine.
Right.
We want to be extremely fucking happy.
Today we're with Tracy Tutor in her beautiful home, and we are talking about everything from becoming a powerhouse, owning the real estate market, being a powerhouse author, and being on the television show for 9 years.
Well,
how many years now?
No, now I'm on I've just finished year 4.
Year 4.
I started after the 9th year.
So, mother, 2 girls, full-time job.
Yeah.
And any philanthropic?
For years, I volunteered at the Children's Hospital, Los Angeles, and was part of a group called the West Side Guild, which we raised money every year for Children's Hospital. And I had to step out of that a few years back, and so I try to just give my time where I can.
Yeah, it's a lot.
But obviously, Children's Hospital is very close to my heart. I had a very dear friend that struggled with her son that was born premature at a half of a pound when she was 6 months pregnant. And so it just became a passion of mine and something that I wanted to make sure that I was continually giving back to.
But I'm living really my passion. I work with people I love. I do the things that make me happy. I love to be in my body, love to exercise, do meditation, and I coach and mentor a lot of young women who are on their way up in their careers, who are like pounding it out and driving so hard and like sweating every single night and, you know, doing the Instagram life and living with a guy that they're not having great relationships with. And they're kind of like, now what? When will I be there? And I'm like, there is no there.
Right.
There is now. Like, there's no there, I promise you. You get all these things.
There's no
and
winning
so, like,
that.
how do you embrace who you are and be your powerhouse self today? And so many women look at you and are thinking, like, how do I become like Tracy? Like, I want to be number one in my career. I'm driven. I want all these things. And I think it's like, for me, it's a grit thing, right? And it's focus and drive. It's being willing to put myself out on the line and do whatever it takes to get to where I really want to be. Like, I'm not going to hold back and not say something because I'm afraid, right?
Right.
And I kind of just step into it and think, how do I do this with integrity and what feels good, and like, how do I step into it? And I think holding back all those years and thinking about the shoulds and being in a marriage I woke up every day and I was like, you are who again? You know that feeling.
How long were you married?
I was married for 10 years, and I married my friend because I had endometriosis and I had been dating someone and we broke up. And I married his best friend because the doctor said, like, you have 6 months to try and have a kid. You're 34 and who knows, you're really driven and successful professionally, but what if you can't have a kid? Like, you don't know, you've never been pregnant. And so this is before I could retrieve eggs. I had to have an embryo in order to freeze at that time. And so I thought, gosh, I have a choice. I can go to a sperm bank, I can forget having kids, which wasn't really an option, or I could marry someone who I thought could be a great dad. And so I married my guy friend, literally my guy friend. And I was...
What a trip.
It was a total trip. And he said to me, you know, 51% of all marriages are arranged in the world, and they never even have like an intimate relationship or anything prior to getting married and have very successful careers. And I'm always like, really? So I kind of bought that. And I tried it. It didn't work. I wouldn't recommend it. I wake up every day. I'm like, you're my friend. I did not want to be in this room with you. But we had 3 kids. But like, in hindsight, I wouldn't have given up having the kids. And I also wouldn't give up learning the lessons I learned, because I think if I could go back and coach my younger self, it would have been like, have more ease, trust the process. You're going to meet a great guy. Don't settle. Right? That would have been the message to myself. Don't settle. But I think in my driving need to be like, and so it's like, I think fear is a 4-letter word, is so apropos, because it was really literally the fear of like not having kids, the fear of not feeling fulfilled, that I was so driven to like do it anyway, even though my gut was like, don't do it. So following your gut, listening to your intuition, you know, being in your body and listening and being kind of present, all of those things I wish I had kind of thought through. So that's how I coach and mentor young women. And Casey's partner, the woman he's with, is a perfect example of an entrepreneur who I have so much respect for and who's gone, the distance. And so I mentor a lot of women like that who just kind of need coaching. And so that was really the impetus for Potential to Powerhouse, was how do we help women look at our powerhouse selves and then kind of peel back the layers a little and be like, yeah, I learned this lesson, but if I could go back and say, Tracy Tutor, sit down, let me have a chat with you, what would it be?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I definitely went through it. So it's funny, I don't think that we all wish we had the foresight to
For sure.
in our 20s to make the kind of decisions that, we're now much more confident making.
Right.
And taking ownership of the decisions that we make. And I think in your 20s that you're searching for so much guidance and sort of outward approval and commitment from others to what your vision or what you think your vision is. And I think a lot of that gets lost, and you sort of wake up and you're in your 30s, and then all of a sudden you're in your 40s and you're like, wait a minute. Did I just live for the last decade in someone else's
body
format of what I wanted and existence? And so I think I don't think I could have done it any differently. Mm-hmm. I walked down that aisle on the horse and the carriage.
For real?
For real.
Ooh, I want to see a photo of that.
Kind of, because I loved horses, but
me too.
But, I did it.
Yeah.
And I loved it.
Yeah.
And I lived in that space. And, and it's not to say that I wasn't madly in love with my husband. I was. But the path that I took on that road to, what I thought was going to be what was best for me and what was going to make me ultimately happy, and sort of on the porch, in the latter part of my years, watching the kids run around and going, this was all wonderful. I checked the boxes, and now I've got kids and grandkids, and I have money, and I'm just chilling out and enjoying my life. And I woke up at probably 37, and I went, this feels really wrong. And then I didn't know how to fix it.
Right.
Then I didn't know how the hell to get out of it. And that's what I think was the impetus for me sort of doing some real soul searching. And I think obviously figuring out what I was going to do with my career, embracing real estate and what I was already doing, but sort of taking more control over it instead of being a passenger in my business, which I was. And I was doing just fine.
Right.
Just fine.
Right.
And, just fine isn't enough. I don't think for any of us. We don't want to be just fine.
Right.
We want to be extremely fucking happy.
Right.
Right.
And powerhouse, powerhouse, women.
And I think that, I didn't know really how to get there, but I think, through some therapy and sorting out how to, exit my marriage in a way that felt good to me, which took some years.
Yeah, it does.
And also, I think embracing my power a little bit more in my business and recognizing that I didn't have to really be a passenger, that I could take a little bit more control over it. And then, of course, taking the chance and doing the TV show that was working so well for the men that had been on it for the last several years was really the flip, and everything changed. And it's not that being on television necessarily changed everything. It's that biting that bullet and sort of pushing that fear to the side and saying, you know what, I want to take some risks. I want to dive off the diving board, and I don't know how deep it is. I don't know how I'm going to land. I mean, I've practiced, but who the hell knows, right?
Right.
And I think just that piece of it, and taking that leap of faith, and sort of believing that I would land on my feet, even though when I jumped, it was so terrifying. I mean, almost debilitating.
Yeah.
Both for my divorce, for the sort of focus on my business again, and obviously for my children, and sort of recrafting my entire life in my early 40s was not something I really, knew
How to do.
how to do. And
Right.
I just knew that I was a survivor.
Yeah.
And I knew that if I didn't bite the bullet and just fucking do it,
Yeah.
that I was never going to do it.
Right.
And so that was like a major turning point for me in everything.
So, just in hindsight, how many kiddos in your family?
I've got two,
In your family?
so I have my sister Kristen,
Yeah.
who's 3 years younger than me. I have, she's my full sister
Yeah.
from my father and my mother. And then my mom was married prior to that and had my brother Jimmy, who was 10 years my senior. He passed away about 13 years ago.
Wow.
And then I have, list goes on. My dad remarried his second wife, Kim, who I adore. And they had Skylar, who's my sister, and she's in her late 20s.
Okay.
And my stepbrother, Derek, who's 31, who I'm also really close to.
Nice.
We don't see each other as much anymore, but still love him to death. And then my dad divorced Kim and remarried a woman who they now have two 6-year-old
Twins?
twins,
Wow.
which I call the bunkles, my children's baby uncles. Because why wouldn't you?
Call them the
May as
bunkles.
well.
I love that.
So
much.
embracing
The bunkles.
embracing the bunkles. And so we start at the age of 6 and we go all the way up to 46.
So were you raised because your brother was, you said, 10 years older?
10 years older than me.
And so did you feel like you were an only child?
Yeah, a little bit. I think when I was from the age of 5 to 10, he was around and he was, my older brother who was annoying and, loud mouth. And then, of course, he left the house at 18.
Yeah.
And, then I did very much feel that. But then my little sister was born. So I think I never felt like an only child. I felt like there was always something happening. But I think not having sort of an older sibling that, was around as much, my brother being so many years older than me, it wasn't like we had that kind of bond when I was very young.
Yeah. I find a lot of Powerhouse women are only children or are oldest children. So that's why I always ask.
that's
because I'm
interesting.
always fascinated. They're used to running the show a little bit. in
I
their
would
household.
definitely consider myself, as my brother was, sort of a different type of personality, struggle with addiction for most of his life, and kind of went down a very different path. So I always felt, even though technically I wasn't the oldest in my family, I always felt like I was the oldest.
And was mom professional?
No, my mom had Jimmy when she was 17 years old with her high school sweetheart, and that didn't pan out. Big shock there. And then she was a single mom working as a secretary until she met my dad, and and then had me when she was 30. So she worked in her 20s. She was providing for herself, and her high school sweetheart couldn't provide for her and her son.
Pull it
So.
up. And dad was also in real estate?
He was a contractor, a contractor, and major public work stuff. So
cool.
started small and then grew it into a public company, Tutor Perini. And
Wow.
so they do casinos, major bridges, tunnels, airports, infrastructure.
Wow, Trace, that's huge. Did you learn from him in that way?
Absolutely.
I mean, were you watching this from the side going, okay, this is cool?
Absolutely. I mean, he was, my dad's Armenian,
Yeah.
but first generation American.
Wow.
And so he grew up in Van Nuys, didn't really grow up with much money, and had, kind of a tough life. Most of his high school friends ended up in jail or were dead, and he ended up in the military, and then went to USC, and then started working for his father in this construction company. But he was tough as nails.
Wow.
Because, my grandparents were immigrants.
Right.
He fought for really everything he had. And so he had that grit about him, and he was tough as nails. And I would see him in the office when I was a kid, And, he had a big mouth. I mean, his bark is bigger than his bite, but he was the guy that you could hear down the hall screaming at someone like, "What are you, stupid? Sit down. Just listen to me. Stop talking." He's that guy.
Yeah.
He's almost a caricature of himself, or I've created that caricature. But nevertheless, I learned a lot of that grit and that toughness from him, because I think being around him and his friends in particular was fascinating to me.
Yeah.
It was a very male-dominated, house, particularly once my parents divorced when I was 10. So I'd go over to his house, and it was him and his buddies, and they were boxing. They were tough guys. Mr. T would hang out at our house when we were kids. Like, he ran with a funny crowd. So I was around them as like this young female, and his friends used to call me, his best friend, Bob, who's since passed on, used to call me Tutor with Tits.
Wow, nice. Like, I'm 11.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Inappropriate. Really and truly, that didn't happen obviously until later. But
Right.
I kind of am.
Yeah.
I'm a little crass, or a lot crass.
Yeah.
I use the F word all the time. I find it to be the perfect vocabulary word to describe many of my feelings on a daily basis, and I don't apologize for it. And I'm tough, and I keep it moving. I say what I mean. I look people in the eye when I speak to them, and I think that part of growing up with him, I think I attribute a lot of my success in being able to walk into certain rooms and be around certain very powerful men or women to him.
Yeah.
He taught me that.
I love that.
Yeah.
And so, because you went to USC undergrad, right? And so were you thinking, okay, because you said earlier, I'm going to get married, kind of have kids, and have my day job, which is Lululemon, Starbucks, whatever that
whatever
might
my jobby, right? Like, I'm gonna act. I'm gonna do like a couple commercials, and then I'm gonna retire and have kids, and you know.
So you get married. At what point did you say, okay, I'm going to be in real estate and jump into this? Was it in your 20s?
Yeah, I was in my early 20s. I had been out of school, out of USC for a few years, and I was auditioning and stuff. And, I went to college. I had a degree, but most actors, you're waiting tables.
Right.
So I did what I thought I was supposed to do, and I made every effort, and I waited tables at salsa bars. I mean, you name it, I hustled. I did
was
what
a great waitress.
I feel like everybody at some point in their lives
has to wait
preferably
tables.
early.
Yeah,
should wait tables.
Right.
I think
a great discipline.
It's a great discipline. It's a great way to connect and figure out people on the fly. I think it's like an incredible tool. I wish I could I told my daughter, actually, because she has to get a job this summer, that I would like to see her working in some sort of sales capacity, because
Smart.
I think it's a really great way to sort of figure out how to read people.
Yeah.
And you should start young.
Do you remember your best tip?
What do you mean?
Like when they tipped you?
Oh, my best tip. It was my best tip from when I was a teenager.
No, your best
Oh yeah.
I was raking in the dough.
Oh yeah. I remember I brought. This is actually horrible. Oh my God, this is so embarrassing. I worked during college in the summers. We lived down in Manhattan Beach, Hermosa Beach, and this particular summer we lived in Redondo Beach, not as nice as Manhattan or Hermosa. And there was 4 of us living in one apartment.
Yeah.
Okay. And I worked at Chillers. I don't know if the frozen drink place is something that you might remember.
Wow.
But I was a waitress at Chillers.
Yes.
And on Saturdays during the summer, it was a really happening thing. And I was really good with people.
Yeah.
And so they always would put me on the patio. And I came up with the idea that I think that we should be doing Jell-O shots. One, because we could do them cheaply, and I knew it would make the restaurant more money, and I could sell them at a premium.
Sure.
So one week I did that, and I had just gotten these guys,
Jell-O
nice
shot
and
it out.
Jell-O shot it up, and cocktails galore, and then I brought my last round of Jell-O shots over, and he gave me $100.
Yeah. I love
And he said, there's more where that came from.
Yeah.
Stay on top of us for the next 2 hours. And by the end of the 2 hours, he had given me over $500 in tips.
You're
and
like
of course,
these
asked me
Jell-O
for my number, which I did not give him.
couldn't believe it. You know, I don't know if you used to have to split your tips with the busboys, but the busboys would be like locked eyes with me because I raked in the dough.
I raked
and
it in.
They were
I
like,
used to hand.
this
Trust
is
me,
my sugar
those guys
mama.
loved me. They were like, I mean, we were a team.
I get it.
You know, but it was such a. I feel like it's such an interesting way to sort of do a study on people,
Totally,
and what they respond to, and you know, particularly like we're talking about being an entrepreneur and figuring out how to, you know, listen to people and understand someone and sit across from someone and make the connection. I mean, there's no better way to learn that than being a waitress. And I think that's, or a waiter. And I think that's part of the reason so many actors, like they have that experience for so many years before they end up getting the gig or you know, making it. And I think I guarantee so many of them could attribute some of that to waiting tables and sort of that grind of having to connect with people and sell yourself.
Completely. And just for me, memory, like remembering he wants a steak medium rare, blah, blah, blah. I had certain situations where I wasn't supposed to write things down. So it really helped me practice.
Right.
Like, okay, steak, mozzarella, you know, sticks, side of ranch, 2 sides of ranch. Okay.
I hated working.
Back.
There were certain nights, like, I mean, you can imagine working at Chillers. Yeah. There were certain nights that I was like, you know, I'm not going to work dollar wing night. I'm just not doing it because A, they could be here and they could have 100 wings,
and I make $10, and
that's like
$100.
My tip is like, you know,
$10.
That's
if
awful.
I'm lucky. Yeah.
So I sorted that piece out, but yeah, I salsa bars, Chillers, you name it. I've run the gamut.
I get that, and also I don't know if you remember what the year you made your first $1 million, but I remember the year I made my first $1 million, and I remember thinking, wow, like this is a lot of hamburgers.
That's a lot of wings.
That's a lot of wings, sister.
I would have had to create the wing.
Right?
In order to make
exactly.
that kind of money.
And own the restaurant and everything else. And I just remember, you know, and I think the journey of kind of expanding into your professional powerhouse self, whatever that may be for you, this idea of having come from a place of really understanding what it means to build something from the bottom up gives you a certain level of appreciation that maybe you wouldn't have necessarily otherwise. So I think those types of jobs are like mission critical.
Well, I agree with you. And when I was kind of looking over what, you know, a little bit of what we were going to hit on today, and, you know, it not being my first rodeo, and I really kind of like to shoot from the hip in these things because otherwise I get too in my head about it. But when I was looking at it, I started thinking about, you know, not just leading up to the success, but also just when you don't know.
Right.
Like everybody says, like, when did you know what you wanted to do, or what was the aha moment? And I think for so many young women and even young men, whether they're my teenage daughter starting to think about college and what she wants to major in, how the hell is she supposed to know what the hell she wants to do for the rest of her life? I don't know these things. Like, I don't understand that. And I don't think that you necessarily need to know the answer or like the, you know, what's going to be, how am I going to end up? I mean, look how you got to where you are and where I am. You know, was sort of a mistake, an accident, tripping along the way and finding the path. And I didn't want to be in real estate. I didn't grow up watching my dad on the job site with a helmet going, I'm going to sell these things one day.
Right.
I thought I was going to be like in a girl band and, you know, accepting a Grammy. And, you know.
Do you sing?
I did, very briefly.
Okay.
But I was more of the rapper. It was like a Spice Girls type group back in, you know, back in the day.
Yeah.
But, you know, I was an entertainer, and that's what I loved. But I didn't plan for real estate. It's just interesting how things unfolded. You know, getting my first job when I was 15 years old, and I was selling suits in the Northridge Mall. And that was my first like blip into sales and into understanding commission. That if I sold more suits than anyone, that I would get a bonus at the end of that week or that end of that pay period or whatever. And that sort of stuck with me, right? And then of course I waited tables, and then I sort of fell into real estate because I decided I didn't want to wait to be discovered as an actor anymore. And I feel like that's something that so many actors kind of struggle with because it's such a passion and it requires so much focus, dedication, and commitment. And I just didn't have the commitment. I didn't want to wake up and be 35 years old, be waiting to be discovered and be waiting tables. I really desperately wanted financial independence from my family. I wanted to do what I wanted to do and spend what I wanted to spend. And so I decided to get into real estate, figuring, well, I have a degree in theater, so that's not going to really take me anywhere. I didn't have anything in business communications. I didn't have a background that supported me doing anything that exciting. And I thought, well, I don't need a degree to do this. I can sell real estate, and I know people, and I grew up in Los Angeles. I understand sort of the neighborhoods and the areas. I can make this work.
Sure.
Totally fell into it.
Right.
And then, of course, it's blossomed into something else. And then you think about, 22 years later, full circle, I'm on television.
Yeah.
Again.
And that's exactly where you wanted to start.
Yeah.
Which is perfect.
It's fascinating. I never would have thought in a million years it would have led me back to that. But it's this exciting moment of getting able to, having the ability to be creative again, having the ability to connect with people again in a different way, and sort of unraveling the real estate stuff into other opportunities that sort of all wrap around one thing. I like to sell shit.
Yeah, I get you. I'm really good at it too.
Yeah.
I love that. So was your real estate career was chugging along, but here you're having babies, married. Mm-hmm. You get a divorce, you're like, I gotta give this thing the gas. Is that basically what snapped into place for you? Were you thinking, Lord, did you have to support your ex in any way? Did you have to write a check for that?
When I got divorced?
Yeah.
Oh, I wrote a check.
So did I.
I mean, I didn't write, let me put it this way. I'm the children's sole provider.
Me too.
So in that sense, but he doesn't get alimony or anything like that.
Okay.
We had a pretty solid prenup going into it, and we just had an understanding that what was mine was mine, what was his was his.
Amazing.
But I financially raise my girls.
Right.
I'm in charge of the school stuff.
Me too.
It is what it is.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with that. But I actually think when it hit me was when I got the opportunity to do the show. And it wasn't my first opportunity to sort of delve into the reality world of television. But I think 10 years prior to that, no one would do it. Right? It was like a scary thing. It could ruin your business.
Sure.
Why do you think
Right, because they can edit stuff, right?
Right.
They can edit it, and then all of a sudden...
Back in the day, before the Kardashians and all of that stuff, and before we knew that reality television was the most incredible opportunity for marketing and branding that you could ever possibly hope for, I was offered a few of those types of shows, and I was like, no, I mean, I'm doing fine. I don't want to poke the bear.
Right.
And there was part of me that didn't have that confidence yet, and didn't have the I don't give a fuck anymore.
Right.
What anybody thinks.
Right.
And then all of a sudden I had it. And I decided to take the show, and that preemptively, I wouldn't say it was the cause of my divorce, but it certainly was a factor in me doing something for myself that had nothing to do with Jason. And I think that was hard.
And how long had you been married at that point?
But when I filed for divorce, we had been married almost 14 years.
And your girls were how old?
Juliet was 10 and a half.
Yeah.
And Scarlett was 8 and a half.
So my kids are the same age. I have 3. So we were 5, 8, and 9 and a half. So
yeah.
So that was a tough choice, especially the uncoupling of that relationship, the transition.
Yeah.
And I remember the day he moved out, I was like, oh my gosh, I felt like somebody left the prison door adjacent after opening it and letting in the food. And I was flipping the door open and running for the hills. I was so excited.
Yeah, it's funny when we were talking earlier about just the jumping off that diving board and sort of not knowing how you're going to land, but you're going to land. I think that's what ultimately happened when I finally made that decision. I remember I had met with an attorney maybe 6 months before I was really ready.
Yeah.
And he just looked at me and was like,
come back
when you're ready.
Yeah.
So when I walked through the door,
Yeah, the second
time, he was
It's
like, all right, so
"Sit
let's
down."
get the paperwork out.
I love this guy.
had, like-
I don't know who it is, but I love him.
I had like
great.
the energy
Yeah. It takes
that had
that.
shifted, that
Yeah.
I was like, I'm gonna land on my feet. We're gonna sort this out.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be fine. My girls are gonna be fine. The whole
Everyone's good.
woe is me moment where you're like, I'm gonna ruin my kids.
Right, of course.
So, I struggle with that a lot, that women a lot of times go through that, and men too.
Or we're going to wait until they graduate.
Right, and then they fuck them up even more.
Right, and
like
8
they're
years
watching
later.
like this dysfunctional, gross marriage
I
where
know.
you're like, I'd rather be at work than be at home, and
Right.
they see that, and then they're mirroring it in their own relationship. So,
Right.
candidly, I've always felt, and I wish I would have left sooner, and I wish
Right.
Jason and I could have come to that realization at 10 years.
Me too.
When they were a little bit younger, candidly.
Me too.
Because I think it's difficult for teenagers to sort of process, because they're kind of coming into their own ideology of like what their own thoughts are. And, when they're 6, it's like mommy and daddy. And as long as, well, at least my feeling, and I don't have all the answers, but my gut was like a 6-year-old, as long as they have their mom and their mom loves them and their dad that loves them, or moms or dads, or
Wherever they
whatever it
live.
is, whatever their story is.
Totally.
They don't necessarily need to live in the same house, and you can create that dynamic from an early age where there's a lot of love around. But teenagers are more complicated. They want to know. They see things. They want to know what the deeper story is, and I think that they struggle with that. So
Totally.
I needed to be strong for my girls. I needed to show them that it was all going to be okay. Jason and I both wanted them to have that safe feeling that while we are uncoupling, you still have your dad, and mom's going to be fine.
Yeah.
And,
And then how long after was the show? Was it during that same period that the show took off, or was it?
I
right?
shot my first season, and as we were shooting, as if that wasn't nerve-wracking enough for me, being like the first female on the show and having the pressure of being boss enough.
Right.
This is when they didn't know me that well.
Right.
Now they're like, oh, shut her up, she's enough boss. But at the time, I was obviously wanting to prove myself and be very present on the show, and I was going through the divorce at the same exact time, and I did not share that with production, obviously, while we were shooting, and then I filed for divorce and let them know when we were done shooting that, So by the time the show aired, we were going through a divorce.
And so how much of your time, and maybe that's changed over the years, but how much of your time is spent on building your business, real estate, et cetera, versus TV and in your entertaining business and all the
When we're
requirements
shooting
around that?
Yeah, I
a
think
lot.
when we're shooting,
It's like 2 full-time jobs.
it is. It's a lot.
Plus mom.
Yes.
3 full-time jobs. Yeah.
It's a minimum of 20 hours extra a week, I would say. And then, of course, then the show stops airing, but then you're doing press or podcasts or, whatever to promote the show. And not to mention other businesses that you've invested in or supporting and, things of that nature. But the bulk of my time is spent selling real estate because that's where the money is for me.
Right.
And I have bills to pay.
Sure. I get it. I so get it. I so get it. So in terms of being on the show and this exposure and experience for you, what's been your biggest aha moment at any point where you're like, wait, I didn't really bank on this part of it? Or has it all kind of been organic as we figure out? It's like being an entrepreneur, right? It's like you're kind of day one, step one, figuring it out. And then all of a sudden you're like, wow, I hadn't really figured that this would happen. Pivot, or how has that been, that experience?
I think being on a show that had been on previously for 9 years before I joined the cast with an all-male cast. I think coming into that, again, I had a lot of pressure, and then I think I was doing a lot to sort of prove that, right? Being tougher on camera, not showing as much vulnerability. And then I finally woke up, and I had sat down with my producer at the beginning of my 3rd season, and he was amazing. His name is Patrick. And he was like, you're plenty and you're enough. And so you really don't need to, like the quiet you is loud enough. So I know that your experience in the past couple of years is to be bigger and bussier and enough bitch and enough all of that to hold your own, but like you don't really need to do that.
Right.
Like you're plenty. So that,
That's great.
I think he just kind of gave me permission. I think it was something that I knew instinctually, but I was a little terrified to sort of put it on camera. It's one thing to live in your daily life that way, but it's another thing to sort of be more vulnerable again. And for a couple of years, when I obviously got divorced on my first season, there was a lot of chatter and I worked so hard. I drove my husband away. You can imagine all of the stuff. And I took all of that to heart. But I think ultimately when I decided to become vulnerable again, my children are back on the show with me, which is a great thing. I'm allowing my relationship to sort of be a part of the show, which for really the last few years, I've been just me by myself.
Right.
No kids on the show, no personal story outside of, work.
Yeah, that's amazing. And then, so when did you decide to write the book?
Year two. After year two, I recognized that I sort of had this moment of clarity, and I said, there's a lot of women that are reaching out to me that are like, thank you for being unapologetic. And
you gave me permission to, right?
Yeah. And I thought, I didn't just land here. This has been like a lot of failure. It's like sort of that overnight success thing that everybody thinks happens. And you're like, oh, no.
Believe me.
It didn't happen overnight.
Yeah.
And I felt like telling that story because obviously the show is very glamorous and it shows a lot of high-end sales, but it doesn't show as many of the failures. And for every 10 houses that I had a lot of success with, there were 6 or 7 that I didn't. Yeah. And so I wanted to share with particularly women in my industry who, we make up 60% of the workforce in real estate or more technically, that, there is a lot of failure and there's the recovery from the failure, sort of the comeback versus the setback is what makes you great.
Totally.
That's what is the difference between sort of a real estate agent and a badass broker.
Right.
And I kind of wanted to talk about that, so I wrote the book.
And the book is...
Fear is just a 4-letter word.
Just a 4-letter word. You look like a total badass.
Thank you. It's right on that bench, actually.
I love this picture of you.
Thank you.
And so has this fulfilled for you what you wanted it to?
God.
Has it been?
So much more. I was terrified to write a book. And, I don't...
To put yourself out there in that way, do you?
Yeah, because I'm a terrible writer. And I worked with a ghostwriter, and I said, you're going to have to spend a lot of time with me because my voice is very distinctive, and I curse, and I'm crass, and I'm not flowery, like and it has to be my voice. And luckily, it is.
That's great.
But I think, I didn't put a lot of my I tell personal stories in there left and right. But it was my first time sort of delving into that area, and I was terrified that it came out during the pandemic. I couldn't get out there and be on camera and sell it and do what I needed to do because, again, that's what I'm great at.
Right.
The sale part.
Of course.
And so all of a sudden I was pinned behind my computer. We were in the middle of the pandemic. It was launched in 2020, July 2020.
Jeez. And
I guess the one thing we had going for us is the title in the book was Fear.
Right.
And in 2020, in July, it's just
interesting.
It was what everybody was talking about. And, in the first week, we became a Wall Street Journal bestseller. So I was so surprised and so grateful. And it just gave me that little boost that I needed to say, you know what, I'm on the right path.
That's right.
I'm going to keep going.
That's right. Follow the breadcrumbs. That's what I always say.
Totally.
I'm like, oh, there's a breadcrumb. I got to go.
It's in front, This is like totally defining where I need to go next. That's really funny.
Yeah, it's really... But I think one of the things that I just love so much about you when I first met you and what really resonated for me that really feels familiar is how you embrace your femininity alongside this kind of really, I would say not tough, but strong exterior. Like you're a strong woman. You have a very distinct voice, as you say. You know exactly what you want. You say what you think. And I think what you're doing is you're allowing space and permission for other women to recognize that side of themselves, but also embrace their femininity.
Totally.
Like
I
you're
mean, we
so
talked about
stunning. You dress in a way that's like, I got a rock and bod, right? I'm going to dress any way I want because I own that's another side of me, and this is who I am in totality. You don't have to separate out this gorgeous, beautiful exterior from being a tough and resolute and dynamic powerhouse female and owning kind of who you are as a woman. That's a big job.
Well, thank you. But I felt like when we met and we were doing that panel with Shelley for Hawk Media, I felt the exact same thing from you. And I think that there's something about women who can embrace both the masculine and the feminine that is really the ticket.
Yeah.
And understanding when to use both. And I think that we can be in our feminine bodies and be so powerful in a room full of men, where I think so many women misinterpret walking into a room full of successful powerhouse men. Not egomaniacs, none of that stuff, but just it's like you feel like you got to tone your femininity down.
Right.
And to me, that's an opportunity to sort of turn the femininity up.
Right. Me
Because
too.
there's nothing more powerful than a room full of men looking at a woman going, wow, she's incredible.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
In her own body.
Right.
You know? And I've really enjoyed like discovering that and like unpacking that a little bit more.
How was it for you? I have so many funny stories as you do about dating before finding my guy. And like, I went from my dating name, which is Michelle.
Stop it.
Seriously. Because it's my middle name, and I thought, okay, at least if someone calls me Michelle, I'll turn potentially to the name.
That's hilarious.
like it's me. But I went from dating and having people introduce me, which was always an issue because they would Google and have this kind of maybe nervous, jittery kind of, you know, maybe coming with preconceived ideas of who I was.
She's a lot. You're a lot.
A lot, right? Versus going onto an app and being Michelle and then going on a date and saying, people would say, so what do you do? And I'd say, oh, I sell beauty products. And they're like, oh, like at parties? And I'm like, yeah, kind of like a party. It's like a big party.
It's a party.
It's a big ass party. And I actually have been down both paths and realized as I was meeting men and trying to figure out how to be all of this with who I wanted to be in a relationship and really wanting to be in my feminine energy with a man who could own kind of masculine, you know, energy with me as the man, but recognizing that I really can't hide or change who I am. I mean, I can pretend to be Michelle who sells lipstick at parties. Except that, like, step 5 dates in, you know, or 8 dates in, or whatever it may be, before they start to say, like, where do you live? Where do I live? Can I pick you up at your house?
Right.
No.
Right. I'll meet you there.
I'll meet you at the
corner.
Like, 4 months into this dating situation, I'll meet you out at dinner. It's just like, there's a point in which you have to decide how to navigate that world. And now that you're in a relationship and you have a partner, it's a different situation. But up until that point, like if you were guiding yourself as that powerhouse woman who's getting back out in the world to date again, having financial means, being successful, taking all that away and just being gorgeous and walking out into the world as a gorgeous woman, that's one thing. And then layer on some of the other aspects, right? How did you navigate that, and would you have done it differently if you could?
I enjoyed dating.
Yeah.
When I got, you know, I mean, I had really been with Jason for almost 18 years by the time I was divorced.
Yeah.
So I never really dated. I just had boyfriends. So
Right.
like this whole concept of like going out with someone and like getting to know them over the course of several dates, and you know, you kiss, and I found it like this like very fun test for myself.
Yeah.
Like I'd leave and I go, did I get through to him? Like,
Yeah.
did we connect? Like, was I funny? Like, was I
But
connected?
was it through intros? Were people introducing you, or how?
Yes. So when I initially started dating, I was introduced to two guys back to back. I was with both of them for a time, one for 6 months and one for a year post my divorce, and those were intros. And the first one, I think, that was fun.
Yeah.
Well, you know, he was a big personality. He was in entertainment, and he was very sweet to me and adored me. But it didn't click.
Yeah.
And despite the fact that I had this guy that sort of adored me, I was still kind of craving more, and I wasn't sure what. You know, so many of my girlfriends were like, "Okay, you need to date a man who's like 55 to 60,
Yeah.
and he like has some planes and a yacht.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
you need to be," and I'm like, well, great.
Great.
Introduce me.
Sure.
But that just wasn't what I guess I wasn't appealing to
Yeah.
those types of men.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
Yeah.
Could it be because I am too much? I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe. But what I found myself, interestingly enough, organically, that was attracted to me were younger men. Mm-hmm. I don't know why.
Yeah.
But from 24 all the way to, 38.
Yeah.
That's what seemingly would just organically happen. Like older men would never approach me. Men my age, no.
No. Interesting.
Yeah.
And so were you comfortable talking about your success in your business, and they were comfortable in meeting you and
Yeah, and I've examined it a little bit, and I think there's, the generation of men, maybe between the ages of like 25 to 35, I think appreciate and sort of grew up differently than we did, with less traditional ideologies. I mean, they're still there, but I think that they sort of appreciate and find it sexy that I don't require them to be happy.
right.
Like, I have my own thing going on. And I
Right.
think, and I'm not speaking about women in general, but I think obviously the men that I've been with have been with either women in the past that they've had to take care of. They have to
Right.
help. They got to get
Right.
from point A to point B. And what became attractive, I think, about me was that I only desired them to connect with, have fun with, laugh with, have great sex with. And there was no need.
Right.
It was just desire.
Yeah.
And that was sexy.
Yeah. I've had this experience over the last year and a half of dating someone who is 17 years younger. Now, when we went to the date, I did not know his age. And of course, as the date's going, I thought it was a quick drive-by date, and then we're maybe an hour and a half in, and I made mention of something like relevant to my
Generation.
era, right? And he was like,
I do that all the
doesn't
time.
register, don't know about it. And I'm like,
Shit.
wait, you don't know about I don't know, whatever, Thompson twins? I can't remember.
How do you not know about Three's Company? It's the
And he's
greatest
like-
show.
And he's like, yeah, I missed that. I'm like, what year were you born? And at some point, I think he said 88. And I was like, 88?
You're like, I graduated.
Like, you missed the entire 80s? Like, you missed the 80s? Like,
I'm
the
dead.
80s.
I know, it's a funny conversation.
And I just remember thinking, and you know what's so funny about this experience, for me at least? We ended up, I thought to myself, oh, this might last a couple of weeks. I mean, I really, really, really enjoyed him, and we had such a great connection. And then the more I got to know him, the deeper we went. I thought, what's ironic here? He's the mature one. I'm the renegade here.
I'm the total renegade in
I'm
my
the
relationship.
renegade.
Yeah, Eric is like my calm.
Yeah.
Like he's grounded. Like he's
Yeah.
the one. Like my girlfriend's like, you never go out anymore, and I'm like, I'm too tired.
I know. I'm exhausted.
And he's, he's always just been a little bit more grounded than I was. So he keeps me
Totally.
I think focused.
Yeah. And, I think back to the year that we were together, and it was during the pandemic. And I just remember his steadiness around all of the crazy news and like, oh, it's a breakout, or this is happening, that's happening. And he was just like, you know what, let's take our supplements and we're going to go work out. And we're going to get to bed at 10 and we're going to just wash our hands. It's going to be fine. And, we're going to live our life. And we spent half our time down at the beach for that year. And I just remember I learned so much about the shoulds around dating and relationship and love and connection, and not placing an expectation on what that happiness quotient for me can feel like if I were with someone who just makes me happy. Like I'm so happy I was having the best, most amazing experience, and instead of worrying about what happens when I take him out to a dinner party, or what happens when we start to integrate back into life with all my friends, and they're so much older than he is, and how do I do that? How does that work? And we just started integrating back in, and everything was fine. And I just think that that year taught me to be really have a heart-led approach to love and not put all the shoulds on it.
I 100% agree.
Right? Because why do that?
And I understand for women that maybe haven't been married yet, or men that haven't been married yet, they're on maybe on a little bit of a different path, and I understand their reasons why. But my story's obviously a little different, and I sort of feel like, it's like a lease with an option to buy.
That's right. That's right.
That's the best way to put it.
That's
in,
right.
like, real estate terms. But, there's nothing wrong with leasing.
That's right.
We still get the same experience.
That's right.
But we can turn it in.
Right. And
Without
also,
the break of a sale.
Exactly.
You're not losing any money.
I love that.
You're just investing in it for the time that it's right.
Exactly.
Without the
but
guilt
also,
or the pressure.
Don't you think that's life in general? I mean, we don't know where we're going to be in
Well,
2
it is
years,
now.
5 years,
It's
10
becoming
years.
more like that now, and I think it's such like a great lesson for like my girls, and for like a younger generation to not feel like they have to. This whole idea of till death do you part,
Right.
in a career, in a marriage, in a friendship, should not fucking exist.
Right.
It's
It's a
not.
lot.
It's till unhappy do us part.
Right.
Like that's really how it should be told, and that's the message that I
love
think
that.
so many younger people today, I hope, follow, because it shouldn't be about what we were taught for so many years. And I wish I had that knowledge when I was in my early 20s. I think
Me too.
would have been a lot different.
I wish I had, and I wish I had also shed this idea of like marriage should look like this, and exactly till death do you part. I mean, are you kidding?
What a weird thing.
It's such a weird thing.
My friend posted something a long time ago that says, when the government gets involved in your relationship, you should know that it's not like something
Gonna go well.
Yeah. Like when there's a contract and
That's right.
you get a slip.
That's right.
Like,
Watch out.
No thanks.
Right.
And she said it much funnier than I just did. But I think ultimately we're all happier when we get to define the terms of what really, truly, authentically makes us wake up and smile. I realize that I'm far more affectionate than I thought I was. I thought I was like, not that person. But like Eric walks in the room and I could be like a total raging bitch because I've had a crazy day at work, and Andres is sitting across from me because I'm sure he's witnessed this several times, where it's like, I'm like, damn it!
Yeah.
Back-to-back calls, like trying to keep up, and then he walks in and like kisses me on my neck or something, and I'm like, hi, what are you doing? Like a dork, like a kid in a candy store. But you know, that's something that, you know, when you talk about defining what makes you happy, not just in business, but in your personal life, these are things that, like, I think change for everybody, and they morph into different things. And it's that journey and discovery that is, you know, I think the most interesting. And so I'm sort of I'm living in that space, and I don't know how long it will last. I don't know if we'll be together forever. And I'm trying my best not to let the noise get into that. Just like in business,
Right.
you know, if you constantly wake up feeling, oh, tomorrow I could fail,
Right.
or tomorrow this could all go fucking south,
Right.
it would not be a good place
Right.
For the
Any of
business.
us. Any of us.
Yeah.
So if you were to fast forward, I mean, you're a massive powerhouse, right? Like, and this is the irony. I hope those who listen to this, because so many of the times people say, oh my God, she's made it, what a powerhouse. And it's weird because you're in the inside looking out saying there's so much more to do. There's so many things I haven't accomplished. There's so many things on my list that I haven't felt yet that I really want to expand into. So this idea is always interesting to me when I examine this. And some of the most powerful women I've met or talked to, including like Gloria Steinem and some of these incredible, say the same thing. And so I think, oh gosh, there's a long road of next iterations of me and iterations of you and who we will
100%.
become. So do you have any idea of, like, if you to fast forward your life in 3-5 years, something that's really impacting you or something that you're driven to want to fulfill or do?
There's a lot of things that I want to still do, but what I've found like works for me so that I don't get overwhelmed with the idea of particularly being an entrepreneur and starting new businesses or investing in a company that I believe in, and being present for that growth, is trying to stay in the moment. If I, you know,
Key.
if I don't live from a space where if I meet someone new and I'm enamored by them and they were unexpected, you know, a lot of times we're like, we don't have room for any more, no more room, no
Right.
more room for new friends, no more room
Right.
for new businesses, no more room.
Right.
And when you put out that energy,
Right.
I think you're setting yourself up to not have like more experience and more to offer. And
Sure.
so every time I meet somebody new, I really, really do my best. And that's why I love doing stuff like this, because it's such a great way to connect with people and get inspired. And truly, it's these types of conversations that have inspired me to become a part of a wine company. You know, everybody wants to start a tequila or wine or whatever, but I didn't. I mean, I would, but it wasn't like at the front of my list. But I think what was exciting about it for me was the story that the two women were telling me. And it was completely unexpected. And we just had lunch. And I walked away from the lunch going, they have something. Like, this is really an interesting concept. And this hasn't been done before. And this is missing from the market. And then all of a sudden it happened. And I think by virtue of being open to that and allowing yourself to meet new people and interesting in areas that you're not really proficient in.
Right.
I don't know nothing. All I know is I like wine.
Sure. And that was just a lunch.
It was a lunch
And look where it led.
that has led to the launch of a no sugar wine.
Amazing.
The first of its kind, really, in the United States. And so that's what's fascinating. And I find that that's the way that I want to continue to live, because I think like in 3 years from now, or in 5 years from now, or in 10 years from now, I could be sitting across from a woman or a man at a lunch and have some sort of incredible connection and want to do something together. And that spurs a whole nother fantastic opportunity that I never envisioned, just
Right.
like real estate. I
Right.
didn't plan this.
Yeah.
It just happened.
Right. So that's it. It's just staying in tune to the breadcrumbs
Exactly.
and staying present to notice them.
There's your book.
Right.
Follow the breadcrumbs.
Follow those breadcrumbs, babe, because they can lead to big, giant
It's so
opportunities
true.
and things.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I so appreciate you sharing your heart, your home,
Thanks.
your story. It is so inspiring. And I just, like I said, one of the things that I was so impacted by with you in meeting you is just this embracing of your powerhouse self, your feminine self, and just like eat small children for breakfast in a baller sort of way that I fucking admire so much.
But that's
I love
exactly
that.
how I felt about you. And I
Yeah.
remember, I had my ear pods in because we were doing this obviously live, and I was in Rome, and my boyfriend was asleep and he couldn't listen to it. And I pulled my ear pods out at the end of it, and I go, "That woman's fucking fabulous." And he goes, "Who?" And I said, "Her name is Tracy Holland." And I did like a whole deep dive into you because I just thought
thank
you were so connected, which is difficult to do in Zoom.
Yeah.
You were so connected and so articulate, but as you were articulating your thoughts on being a female entrepreneur and all of the great stuff that you were offering, there was a depth to it that was so much more interesting. And I know our conversation probably was different than some of the other conversations.
On
And
that
by the way,
panel.
talk about going off book. Like they had so many
They're like,
questions
bring these
for
girls
us.
in.
Bring them in! And we were just like on this
Path.
really cool thing. And I think it ended up being so much more interesting than what was really intended. So thank you.
Yes.
Because I thought you were fantastic.
So I thought the same about you.
Well, look at us.
How fun.
Well, thank you for coming.
Thank you. I so appreciate it. So fun. So Trace, if people want to reach you, buy the book, follow you on Instagram, please.
You can buy the book, Fear is Just a Four-Letter Word, pretty much in any major bookstore. Very easy to get it on Amazon, obviously. My Instagram handle is @Tracy Tutor, real complicated. And then, of course, if you're looking for real estate in Los Angeles or Texas, New York, I can be seen and contacted at tracytutor.com.
And it's Tracy.
Tracy, no E, and Tutor.
Same, I spelled the same, the good way.
Oh, the right way. I don't know
you.
if you guys know about this, but I'm awesome on TikTok. I have no idea. But yeah, what is my TikTok? Oh, I'm on TikTok for all you young folk out there.
Tracy Tutor on TikTok. Woo, so fun.
Our way out of here. Yeah, that was fun.
Thank you so much.